that band all dressed in white.
'Cause it's gonna trouble the water.
It looks like the Israelite.
'Cause it's gonna trouble the water. Wade in the water.
Thank you. Welcome, friends, neighbors. I love the spirituals. So much so that in 2007, I asked and then helped move the United States Congress to a unanimous vote to honor the slaves for their contributions to our nation with our deepest gratitude and respect, and recognize the African American spiritual as a national treasure.
Wade in the water. Wade in the water, children, wade out in the water. 'Cause it's gonna trouble the water.
When I showed you the legislation, you said, well, Calvin, I'm so proud of you for preserving the African American spiritual.
Yeah,
Because if we don't do it, it'll be like we were never here.
that's right. You had the idea and it was just on time. It really was, because too many of our young people now know all the latest music, but nothing of our spiritual.
Yes.
Nothing where they came from, and how they were developed, and how they were used, really for survival.
Yes.
Over yonder, what do you see?
'Cause it's gonna trouble the water.
Holy Ghost coming on me.
'Cause it's gonna trouble the water.
The truth is, if we don't know where we came from, how can we possibly know who we are and where we were going? For those of us like myself, whose ancestors were born in slavery in America, the Negro spirituals and slave songs hold within them the key to our African American cultural heritage and America's oral history. The American story is like a patchwork quilt. It is made up of different patterns, colors, separate pieces of cloth. Carefully, the separate pieces are sewn together to make a beautiful quilt that will be passed down in families generation after generation. Like the quilt, our stories bind us together as Americans. Like the quilt, it took every slave and every non-slave to build this great country we live in today. We need to be grateful for all of our ancestors.
Wade in the water. Wade in the water, children.
As a kid that grew up in a sharecropper's cabin and wanted to just find some way to honor my ancestors, I'm so grateful that you helped and pushed forward, and you continue to push forward on so many levels. For everyone that I know and everyone's going to look at this and hear it, thank you.
Well, I want to thank you. I want to thank you for getting out there and encouraging Rose DeLore and many of us in the Congress to co-sponsor this piece of legislation, to push it through the House and make it real, not just for this generation, but for generation unborn. So you have made a lasting contribution to a very rich tradition. It's more than a tradition. It's part of our heritage. It's part of the stuff that make us where we are.
Yes.
And we cannot forget that.
That's right.
And we cannot forget the contribution you made. So thank you.
Thank you.
Matter of fact, the first sentence of the historical legislation begins with, whereas in 1619, slavery was introduced to the colonies. I thought, wow. And then you know what? In my travels, in my ongoing travels to find out more about the people who created the spirituals, I found myself standing on the property where slavery started here in America.
You don't believe I have been redeemed.
'Cause it's gonna trouble the water.
So I figured I have to find out more. And then I began to think, 12 years prior,
is when the European settlers arrived in 1607. Was it easy for them? I don't think so. The Indians started to attack them. They had the firepower. They fought back. They even started building this big fort. I mean, it took a lot of energy to do this, to cut the trees down, to stack these big, tall trees up after they had trimmed them. So now they built this fort. And if it hadn't have been for the chief's daughter, Pocahontas, the Indians would have killed them all. Because think about this, you had 14,000 Indians around them and less than 100 of the settlers. The odds are against them. Now, the other thing that happened is that they had a terrible drought back then. So the water was all running out, especially the fresh water, because now the sea is coming in. They were beginning to starve behind this fort. And when the food all ran out, the settlers ended up killing their dogs for food to eat. And when that was all gone, they ended up killing their horses for food to eat. And when that was all gone, they ended up digging up their loved ones' bodies for food to eat. I mean, it was not easy back then. You know, after the years went on and on and on, the settlers began to get more land, began to push the Native Americans back a bit more. But they didn't have a sustainable food source. Now, it wasn't until 1619 when the first 20 and odd Africans arrived on the sea vessel, the White Lion. The White Lion had been in battle at sea with a Portuguese slave ship. And during the battle, they took on these 20 and odd Africans aboard. And the White Lion traded the 20 and odd Africans to the settlers for food and material to repair their ship. Their ship was badly damaged. So the settlers actually put the 20 and odd Africans to work, and they cleared 100 acres on this property that I'm talking about, historical Jamestown, just on the other side of the Colonial Parkway, and they planted produce. And they are the ones that actually created a sustainable food source for the settlers. And now that I've talked about the people, let's talk about the spirituals. When I look back at the spirituals, these songs have helped save, heal, protect people for generation after generation.
People, one thing you must know, that Calvin Earl loves the spirituals. Thank you for coming. Thank you.
How did you like the show?
That was great. Yeah, wonderful.
Oh, really enjoyed it. Thank you so much. Thank you for coming. It was such an honor
Well,
to play.
it was a pleasure for us. Had a good crowd, and everybody was enthusiastic. But I noticed some of them understood the secrets behind your hymns better, right?
Well, the spirituals, yes, the spiritual. And that's the reason I wanted to be able to preserve them so people would understand not only the songs, but the stories.
Sure.
And it's like the stories do bind us together.
Well, the man sitting over there by the ladies that knew all the answers,
Yes.
He was my playmate when I was a boy.
Really?
Yeah, we grew up in Orchard, Georgia.
Wow.
I didn't have any white neighbors. All my neighbors were African American. So I grew up in a black culture.
Now, what about the 20 and odd Africans I had mentioned on this property? Did you know anything? Because I didn't know anything about this.
I didn't.
And,
I learned a lot.
And that's the thing that I've been trying to do is find out more. And this historical piece of property is not even a historical site yet.
Where is it? On the
And it's
James
just-
River.
Yes.
That's where my ancestors settled in
Wow.
the 1600s.
Wow, you see all the connection.
I know.
It's like that quilt I was talking about, how it binds us
my
together.
ancestors and your ancestors are probably right there together.
Exactly.
Follow me down to Georgia.